There is a city on the western coast of what we now call Turkey. In 500 BCE, it was one of the largest cities in the Greek world. Its harbour faced the Aegean. Its streets were wide and white. Its temple, the Temple of Artemis, was so large and so ornate that the ancient world listed it among the 7 wonders of the earth. The city was called Ephesus, and somewhere in it, on a particular morning around the year 500 BCE, a man was handed an invitation. The citizens of Ephesus wanted a lawgiver. They had seen what Solon had done for Athens. They wanted their own code, their own constitutional order. They needed someone with the standing and the intelligence to write it. The man they asked was the right choice by every conventional measure. His name was Heraclitus. He was the son of Basilides. He came from a line of kings. The title of the city's priest-king had, by heredity, belonged to his family for generations. He had the birth, the education, and the reputation. He declined. He walked instead to the temple courtyard, sat down among the children, and played with knucklebones on the steps. When the Ephesian elders came to ask why he would not accept, he gave them an answer they found unsatisfying. He said that governance, by its nature, required the pretense that things could be made permanent. Laws assumed fixed conditions. Fixed conditions were an illusion. He would not spend his life maintaining an illusion. You have perhaps known someone like this. A person whose refusal to perform the expected role was not stubbornness, but something quieter and harder to name. Not arrogance, certainty. Heraclitus had arrived at a certainty, not the certainty of a man who has answered every question, but the certainty of a man who has understood the nature of the question itself. He understood that beneath every surface in the world, every institution, every arrangement, every belief, held firmly by every confident person, there was a river. And you cannot step into a river twice. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Tonight we begin where he began, in Ephesus, in the early years of the 5th century before the Common Era, with a man who gave up the only thing his world valued, power and its maintenance, to sit with a single idea. And that idea was this: everything you see, everything you are, everything you touch and hold and call yours is already in motion, already changing, already something different from what it was a moment ago. He was not a cheerful philosopher. He was not a comfortable one. The ancient world did not call him the serene or the clear. They called him something else. We will come to that name in a moment. But first, the evening ahead of you. It is some time after dark, or close enough to it. The room is quieter than it was an hour ago. Your body has carried today's weight and set it down, mostly. Your mind may still be moving. That is all right. A moving mind is a mind in its element. Tonight, we will give it somewhere to move. Heraclitus of Ephesus had one central insight. Everything else he wrote grew from it like roots from a single tap. We are going to spend the next 3 hours following those roots into the ground. By the time this ends, there is one thing I want you to understand. Not memorize, not analyze. Understand in the way you understand that you are tired, not as a fact you have been told, but as something you feel in the body. The thing Heraclitus understood, the thing the ancient world found so hard to hold that they called him obscure, called him strange, called him the one they could not follow. You will follow tonight. Because the idea is not strange at all. It is the most obvious thing in the world. It is so obvious that it is easy to spend a lifetime not quite seeing it. Let your body settle into the weight of where it rests. We begin. Chapter 2, The Book in the Temple. He wrote one book, not a dialogue, not a series of lectures, not a correspondence with a friend. One book. The title, as best historians can reconstruct it, was On Nature, the same title used by several of the pre-Socratic philosophers. But the content was unlike anything the ancient world had seen. He left it in the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. He did not publish it in any modern sense. He placed it in the care of the goddess, in the great temple whose scale still astonishes even in ruins. Whether he meant it as an offering, a safeguard, or simply a location where it would be preserved by the temple priests and their attention, no one fully knows. What is known is that he left it there deliberately, and that he left it with no concern for whether it would be read and understood. He may have hoped it would not be. The Athenian playwright Euripides obtained a copy, or so the story goes, and brought it to Socrates. Socrates read it slowly. When asked what he thought of it, he said that what he understood was excellent. He assumed the rest, the parts he could not follow, must be equally excellent. He added, with a characteristic dryness, that it would take a diver from Delos to retrieve its deeper meanings. Delos, in those years, was associated with the best deep-sea divers in the Greek world. The book was difficult, deliberately so. Not because Heraclitus could not write clearly, his fragments, even in translation across 2,500 years, have a hard-edged precision that most writers working today could not manage. But because he understood that the thing he was trying to say could not be said in a clear way without being immediately misunderstood. You cannot make simple something that is not simple. You can only hand someone a complex instrument and wait. Here is the first thing I want to plant in the room with you tonight, and we will come back to it. Heraclitus believed there are two kinds of rest. Not two kinds of tired, that is a different distinction, and we will come to it, but two kinds of rest. The first kind most people find easily enough. The body demands it. The eyes close. Tonight, you are looking for it. The second kind is harder. It does not come from stopping. It comes from something else. We are building toward the second kind tonight. Hold that lightly. It will return. The book is gone now, the original, the one he placed in the temple. The temple itself was burned down in 356 BCE, rebuilt, burned again, dismantled for stone in the centuries after the fall of the Roman Empire, reduced to a single standing column and scattered rubble. If the book was in the temple, when it burned with it. What survives of Heraclitus's thought survives as fragments, roughly 130 sentences and half-sentences, preserved because other ancient writers quoted him, often to argue against him. We know him through what others found worth fighting. That is its own kind of evidence. A thinker nobody needed to argue against has not said anything difficult enough to matter. Heraclitus said something difficult enough to matter. The Stoics read him. Plato argued with him. Aristotle found him logically problematic and said so at length. Nietzsche, writing in 1872, said that of all the pre-Socratic philosophers, Heraclitus was the only one he could read without wanting to revise. Heidegger spent 2 full lecture courses in 1943 and 1944 in Freiburg, while the war pressed in on every side, trying to excavate what Heraclitus had meant by a single Greek word. That word. We are almost ready for it. It will take one more chapter to set the stage properly. For now, the temple, the book. The man who left it there and walked back to whatever the next hour required of him, unconcerned whether anyone could follow. There is something in that posture, not indifference, a kind of freedom from the need to be understood on anyone else's terms. Let your jaw soften. Notice your breath. You do not need to change it. Just notice. We continue. Chapter 3. The obscure. The ancient Greeks gave their philosophers epithets. Democritus was called the laughing philosopher. Pyrrho was called the man who could not be disturbed. Diogenes the cynic was called the dog. Heraclitus was called Ho Skotinos. The obscure. The name stuck for a reason. His writing was layered in ways that made readers feel they had understood something, then returned to find they had understood only the surface. He wrote in riddles, not the playful riddles of a man showing off, but the hard riddles of someone who has seen a thing that resists direct description. He once wrote, and this is a paraphrase, since translations disagree on almost every word, that nature loves to hide. The phrase in Greek is short and dense, physis cryptestai philei. 4 syllables into 3 words. The nature of reality loves concealment. The real order of things does not advertise itself. This was not mysticism. Heraclitus was not a mystic in the way we sometimes use the word. He was not arguing that reality was fundamentally unknowable. He was arguing that it requires a particular kind of attention to see. The attention most people cannot sustain. Not because they lack intelligence. He had no patience for the idea that intelligence was rare, but because they are not willing to be uncomfortable long enough. He said that most people, and he was not gentle about this, sleep even while they appear to be awake. They move through the world operating on their private interpretation of events, their personal sense of how things work, their inherited assumptions about what is solid and what is permanent. They never stop to ask whether the solidity is real or whether the permanence is an arrangement they have agreed to maintain. Socrates made a similar observation in Athens about 60 years later. He found it remarkable that people who appeared busy and purposeful had, on examination, no clear idea what they were actually doing or why. Heraclitus said this earlier and more sharply. He called it living in a private world, a world of one's own making, disconnected from the common order of things. There is something in this that resonates in the quiet of a late night, when the world has gone still and the version of yourself that performed all day has been set aside. You know the difference. The person who showed up at the office or the meeting or the dinner, that person operated on certainties they did not examine. This room, this dark, this quiet, these create a different condition. Something opens. Heraclitus spent his life in that condition. He did not wait for night. He maintained it through the middle of the day in a city that had no patience for it. This is why the Ephesians could not use him. A lawgiver must believe in permanence. He believed in process. Now, the second open loop I want to plant here, and this one will take longer to resolve. There is a word, a single word, Greek, used by Heraclitus at the center of everything he wrote. It is a word we still use today. We will use it several times tonight. But what most people mean by it, and what Heraclitus meant by it, are different enough that he would not recognize his own term in casual modern conversation. The word is logos. We will arrive at it fully. But I want you to know it is there, ahead of you, like a room with the door open and the lamp already on. He was obscure because what he saw was not simple. He was precise in the way that a difficult thing, described exactly, produces the appearance of obscurity. He was not hiding. He was pointing at something that required patience to follow. Tonight, we follow. Let your shoulders drop if they have crept upward. Let the weight of the day settle into the surface beneath you. Nothing you hear tonight asks anything of you. You are not being tested. You are being given something. The obscure man from Ephesus is going to tell you something true. He has been waiting 2,500 years to say it to someone who would listen. Chapter 4, the Logos. The word logos already existed before Heraclitus used it. In ordinary Greek, it meant word, account, reason, speech. A logos was an explanation. You gave your logos when asked to justify a decision. A merchant's logos was his ledger, his accounting, his record of how things stood. Heraclitus took this word and expanded it until it could hold the whole of reality. When he wrote, and again, these are paraphrases across a long translation history, that listening not to him but to the Logos is to acknowledge that all things are one, he was doing something radical. He was saying that beneath the apparent variety of the world, fire and water and stone, and the human face and the flight of birds and the turning of seasons, there is a single principle of organization. Not a god, at least not a god in the popular Greek sense, not a person or a personality. A principle, a deep structure, a logic that the world runs on whether or not anyone notices. He compared it to language. A language is a system. Individual words and sentences appear separate, appear to mean discrete things. But behind every sentence is grammar. Behind the grammar is something deeper still, the capacity for meaning-making that structures the whole enterprise. You can spend a lifetime producing sentences without ever examining the grammar. Most people do. He said the Logos was like that. The world produces events, experiences, the appearances of separate and solid things. Behind it all is the grammar of reality. The principle by which one thing becomes another, by which change has order, by which even disorder has a hidden pattern. The Stoics, reading Heraclitus 300 years later, made the Logos central to their philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, in the imperial tent on the Danube in 170 CE, writing the private notes that became the Meditations, referred to the Logos dozens of times. He called it the rational fire, the principle of reason that runs through all things, including himself. He tried to align himself with it each morning before the battles. Not because the battles would go well, he knew they might not, but because alignment with the Logos was the only control he actually possessed. Epictetus, born into slavery and freed, built his entire philosophy around a related idea. There are things within your power and things outside it. What is within your power is your own Logos, your capacity for reason, for judgment, for choosing how to respond to events. What is outside your power is everything else. The Logos within you is yours. The rest belongs to the Logos outside you. This is not fatalism. Heraclitus was not a fatalist. He was not saying that nothing matters because everything is determined. He was saying something more subtle, that the effort to resist the nature of reality is different from the effort to understand it. One exhausts you. The other, slowly, over time, settles something. We are getting close to what this means for you tonight. Not quite yet. There is more of Heraclitus to cover first. The Logos is the word. Hold it. We will return to it from several directions before the night is done. What it means in practice, what it asks of you, if it asks anything, is not a set of actions. It is a shift in attention, a willingness to look at the deep structure rather than only the surface appearances. Heraclitus thought most people never did this. He was frequently irritated by the fact. He wrote about it with the particular frustration of someone who has seen something obvious that everyone around him is missing. The obvious thing was this: the world is a single process, not a collection of separate things that happen to coexist. A process. One process. You are part of it. You have always been part of it. The version of yourself that imagines it stands apart, that watches the process from outside, is itself part of the process. There is no outside. There is only the river. We are almost there. Chapter 5, Fire. He said the world was made of fire, not literally, or not only literally. Heraclitus was engaging in a tradition that predated him by a generation. Thales had said everything was made of water. Anaximenes had said air. Pythagoras, roughly contemporary with Heraclitus, was arguing for number. Each of these was less a claim about physical substance and more a claim about the nature of reality. What is the primary thing? What does everything else resolve to? Heraclitus chose fire, and the choice was deliberate and precise. Fire is not a substance in the way that water is a substance or stone is a substance. Fire is a process. It is the conversion of one thing into another. It is transformation made visible. A flame takes in fuel, takes in oxygen, releases heat and light, consumes itself in the act of burning, and in doing so changes everything it touches. It is never the same flame twice. The fire in a hearth an hour from now is not the same fire it is now, but it is still the fire. This is the key. This is what Heraclitus meant. He wrote, and this is a paraphrase of fragment B30, that the world, the same for all, was not made by gods or men, but always was, is, and will be an ever-living fire. It kindles itself and extinguishes itself in measures, not randomly. The fire of reality follows a rhythm. It burns and dims and burns again. The universe is not running down, it is cycling. The cycling itself is the Logos. He described the transformation this way: fire becomes water, water becomes earth, earth becomes fire again. Not in some mystical sense, but in the sense that all matter is in a process of conversion. What appears solid and stable is solid and stable only at the particular scale at which you are looking. Go small enough, and Heraclitus did not have the physics to know how right he was, and nothing is solid. Everything is process. Seneca, writing in Rome 1600 years later, put it in a different register when he wrote to his friend Lucilius that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. He was pointing at a related thing. Life is a fire. It burns. The burning is the point. The mistake is treating it as a stone, something that simply is statically, until it is not. Blaise Pascal, in a cold room in Port Royal in the 1660s, arrived at his own version of the same terror. He wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room. Not because sitting is hard, but because sitting in a room forces you to acknowledge the fire, the conversion happening inside you, the thing that cannot stop even when you want it to. Heraclitus would have found Pascal comprehensible. Two men in different centuries, different languages, different traditions, arriving at the same problem from different directions. The fire will not hold still. You are the fire. The question is what you do with that. Let your body feel the weight of the surface beneath you. The room is quiet. Somewhere in you, cells divide and repair. Somewhere in you, the chemistry of the day is slowly resolving into the chemistry of sleep. The fire is still burning. You do not need to manage it. The fire knows what it is doing. He left that in the temple too, the insight that the process does not need your intervention to proceed. It proceeds. Your job tonight is only to stop blocking it. Chapter 6. The river. He never quite wrote the phrase as we usually quote it. What Heraclitus appears to have written in a fragment preserved by the philosopher Plutarch around 500 years after his death runs roughly like this: "It is not possible to step twice into the same river. The river scatters and gathers again, and approaches and recedes." The popular version, "You cannot step into the same river twice," is close. The original is richer. The river scatters and gathers again. It does not only flow, it disperses itself across the floodplain and collects again into the channel. It rises and drops. It is never the same body of water. And yet we say, the Tiber, the Danube, the Cayster, the river near Ephesus, that Heraclitus surely walked beside. The name holds, while the substance beneath the name changes continuously. This is not a problem to be solved. It is not an error in the way we use language. Heraclitus was not making a pedantic point about naming. He was describing the structure of reality. Every river is a pattern. The banks, the gradient, the direction of flow, these are the pattern. The water that runs through the pattern is replaced continuously. The pattern and the substance are two different things. What we call the river is actually the pattern. What runs through it is always new. Now, everything is a river. Your body is a river. The cells change, the molecules cycle through. The memories are continuously revised by the act of remembering them. In 7 to 10 years, most of the atoms in your body will have been replaced by others. The version of you reading this is not the version who read the last chapter, not in any substantial way. And yet, you, the pattern, still recognizable. Your mind is a river. The thought you had this morning has been altered by every thought that came after it. The memory you carry of a conversation from years ago is not the conversation. It is the most recent revision of the most recent revision of an original experience that no longer exists in its original form. This is not loss. Heraclitus did not mean it as loss. You have had this experience, a conversation that loops in the mind. You are on the commute or lying in the dark, and you are editing the lines, changing what you said or what they said, arriving at a version that makes more sense or feels more just. Notice what the loop is doing. The mind is trying to make the conversation permanent, trying to hold the water in the channel, trying to step into the river and keep the river still around you. The river will not hold still. It never held still. The conversation is gone. What remains is the pattern it left in you. And that pattern, too, is changing. There is something that happens when you stop trying to hold the river. We are a long way from describing it yet, but plant it here. The holding is the difficulty. The river is not the difficulty. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in the Meditations that everything is in flux. He used different words. He was a Roman, writing in Greek for private reasons. 2 centuries after Heraclitus, he wrote of the time before him and the time after him as equally vast and equally empty of his particular concerns. His wars, his grief at the death of his children, his arguments with his court, the river would carry them all. He wrote this not to make himself feel small, but to make himself feel accurate. He wanted to see things as they were. That is all Heraclitus was asking. See the river as it is. You are in it. You have always been in it. Chapter 7, Panta Rhei. The phrase itself, Panta Rhei, everything flows, was not written by Heraclitus. Not exactly. It appears to have been coined by one of his followers, the philosopher Cratylus, to summarize the master's doctrine. It comes down to us through Plato, who quotes it in the Cratylus and the Theaetetus, arguing against it. But the idea is Heraclitean in every fiber. Everything flows. Not just rivers, not just water, everything. The stone in the path flows, at a rate too slow for a human lifetime to register. The mountain flows, at a rate too slow for civilization to notice. The stars flow, at a rate so vast that the human mind requires mathematics to approximate it. And the self flows at a rate fast enough that you can feel it if you are paying the right kind of attention. Plato did not like this. His entire philosophical project was, in a sense, a response to Heraclitus. Plato needed things to be permanent somewhere. His theory of forms, the idea that behind every imperfect earthly chair is a perfect ideal chair that does not change, was his solution to the problem Heraclitus had raised. If everything flows, then knowledge is impossible, because by the time you have said what something is, it has become something else. Number? Heraclitus would not have accepted this as a problem. He would have said that Plato was looking for the wrong kind of stability. You do not find permanence in the things. You find it in the pattern. The logos does not change. The fact of flux does not change. The river changes. The river's being a river does not. This is a subtle distinction. It takes time to sit with. Consider what remains constant in you across the decades of your life. Not your opinions, those shift. Not your beliefs in detail, they evolve. Not your body, it cycles. What remains? Something does remain. You recognize yourself in photographs from 30 years ago, not only by the face, but by something behind the face. A way of looking, a habit of attention, something that persists through the changes. Heraclitus called that the logos within you, not your personality. Personalities are performances, adaptations to circumstance. Deeper than personality, the structure that generates the personality. Carl Jung, writing in Switzerland in the early 20th century, was working on a similar problem from a different direction. He called it individuation, the process by which a person comes to recognize and inhabit their actual self, distinct from the self that was shaped by expectation, by wound, by the need to survive the family and the school and the culture. The self beneath the self. He wrote that Who looks outside dreams, and who looks inside wakes. He meant something close to what Heraclitus meant by the Logos. There is a structure within you that is not the same as your daily performance. Most people never sit still long enough to find it. Let the breath move on its own. Notice it doing so. It knows the rhythm without being told. Something in you holds the pattern even as the water changes. That something has a name. We already know what it is. We will understand it more fully as the night continues. For now, Panta Rhei. Everything flows, including the thought that is bothering you. It is in motion. It is already becoming something else. Chapter 8. The Unity of Opposites. Here is where Heraclitus became genuinely strange to his contemporaries. He wrote that the road up the mountain and the road down the mountain are one and the same road. He wrote that day and night are one, that living and dying are one, that being hungry and being full are one, that health and disease are one. This was not wordplay. He was not being clever. He was pointing at something he considered self-evident, but widely missed. Everything that exists requires its opposite in order to exist. Day is only day because there is night to set it against. Health is only recognizable as health because disease is a possibility. Rest means nothing to the body that has never been tired. The opposites do not merely coexist, they constitute each other. Remove one and you remove both. There is no up without a down, no hot without cold, no silence without sound. To be the absence of, they are not enemies in a war where one will eventually win. They are partners in a system, each generating the conditions for the other's existence. Aristotle found this infuriating. He wrote that Heraclitus violated the law of non-contradiction, which states that a thing cannot both be and not be the same thing at the same time. A road cannot be both up and down simultaneously. But Aristotle was looking at the road. Heraclitus was looking at the road's function in the landscape. The same physical path serves different purposes depending on your direction. The path does not change. The direction changes. The relationship between you and the path changes. What stays constant is the structure that makes both journeys possible. This matters for the way you think about the qualities of your life at this particular moment. The tiredness in your body right now is not only a deficit, it is evidence of effort, evidence of engagement with the day. The exhaustion that sends you toward sleep is the same mechanism that will send you toward wakefulness in the morning, not opposites, one system cycling. The grief you carry for someone you have lost, Heraclitus would not comfort you by telling you the grief is an illusion. He would say the grief and the love are one thing. The grief is proof the love was real. They are the same road, traveled in different directions. This is not an easy thing to hear. We tend to want one side of the pair without the other. We want health without the shadow of disease. We want the love without the grief. We want the warmth without the acknowledgement that warmth only registers against cold. Heraclitus was not cruel. He did not think this was cruel. He thought it was liberating. When you stop fighting the structure of reality, stop trying to have one without the other, something releases. Not immediately, not dramatically, slowly, like a tension in the hand that has been gripping something for so long you forgot you were gripping it. The hand opens. The room does not answer. Let the weight of the thought settle where it is. We continue. Chapter 9, War as Teacher. He said something that troubled the ancient world then and is easily misread now. He wrote, again paraphrase, that war is the father of all things and king of all, that it shows some as gods and others as men, some as slaves and others as free. This looks, on the surface, like an endorsement of violence. Heraclitus was not a violent man. He had refused political power. He had no interest in conquest. He was using war in the way he used fire, as a metaphor for something that cannot be avoided and is not, at its core, a catastrophe. The Greek word is polemos. It means conflict, strife, opposition. The thing that happens when two forces meet. He was saying that without this meeting of forces, nothing develops. Nothing becomes anything. The seed does not crack open without the pressure of the earth. The fire does not burn without friction between fuel and air. The mind does not sharpen without an idea that resists it. He was saying, difficulty is not the enemy. Difficulty is the mechanism. If you think about the experiences of your life that changed you most, not the comfortable ones, the difficult ones, you will find usually that they had exactly this quality. Something pushed back. Something resisted. And in the resistance, something in you had to respond, had to adapt, had to become something it was not before. Viktor Frankl, in Auschwitz, in the winter of 1944, arrived at a version of this insight under conditions of extremity that Heraclitus never faced and that most of us will never face. He observed that the men who survived were not always the physically strongest. They were often the ones who could find meaning in the resistance itself, not acceptance of the evil, meaning found within the conditions the evil created. He wrote that what does not kill me, quoting Nietzsche, who was quoting something older still, makes me stronger. Heraclitus would have recognized the grammar of that sentence. The difficulty in your life right now, whatever is pressing on you, whatever is not resolving the way you hoped it would, is not, from the Heraclitean view, evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that the process is underway, that the fire is burning, that the opposites are doing what they do, generating, through their meeting, something that would not exist if either side had simply won. This is the third thread I am planting tonight. Stay with it lightly. We will return to it, and when we do, it will have a fuller shape. If you are still awake, this is a good moment to notice that. Notice the body has settled a little. Notice the room has been quiet for some time. The mind is doing what it does, following the thread. It does not need to follow every thread. You do not need to keep every word. The parts that matter will find you. We continue quietly into the next piece. Chapter 10, The Hidden Harmony. He wrote, and this fragment, number 54 inches, the traditional numbering, is one of the most quoted things he left, that the hidden harmony is better than the obvious one. The obvious harmony is easy when everything is in balance, when the scales are level, when the music is smooth and unvarying. The harmony is apparent. You do not need to look for it. It announces itself. The hidden harmony is harder. He used two instruments to describe it, the bow and the lyre. This is fragment B, 51, and it is one of the most carefully worked images he left us. A bow is held in tension. The string pulls against the stave. If you release the tension, if you remove the opposition between string and wood, the bow becomes a useless stick. The tension is not a problem to be solved. The tension is the bow. The bow exists as a bow only because of the opposition within it. The lyre works the same way. The string under tension produces a note. Release the tension and there is silence, not music. The harmony the lyre makes is not despite the tension, it is made of the tension. Now consider what this says about the moments in your life that felt most out of order. The opposition in a relationship that was also the relationship's defining quality. The friction in the work that was also the work's growth mechanism. The difficulty that was the source of whatever was best about that period. The hidden harmony does not look like harmony. It looks like conflict. It looks like imbalance. It requires an eye that can see beneath appearances to the structure. Heraclitus thought this eye required cultivation. Most people are looking at the surface. The surface is often rough. They conclude from the roughness that something is broken. Nothing is broken. The bow is working. Montaigne, in his tower in Bordeaux in 1571, after losing his best friend La Boétie, and then his father, and then his first child in rapid succession, retreated from public life and did something no one had quite done before. He began writing about himself, not his achievements or his arguments, but his confusions, his contradictions, his inconsistencies. He wrote that every man carries the full form of the human condition within him. He was doing what Heraclitus would have recognized, looking for the hidden harmony within the apparent chaos of a grief-filled interior. He found something, not resolution, not the end of grief, something steadier than that, a kind of company in his own complexity. Heraclitus would have said, the harmony was always there. You finally stopped making enough noise to hear it. Breathe. Nothing in this room is asking anything of you. The breath moves on its own. The hidden harmony is in the room. It was always in the room. Chapter 11. The Way Up and the Way Down. Fragment B60 is the simplest sounding of all his fragments and one of the most disorienting if you sit with it long enough. The way up and the way down are one and the same. He meant it physically first. A mountain path is the same path, ascending and descending. The direction of travel is different. The path is identical. This is obvious. So obvious that it hardly seems worth saying. Why did he say it? Because people did not live as if they understood it. They treated the going up and the going down as categorically different kinds of experience. One to be sought, one to be avoided. They invested the ascent with meaning and the descent with shame. They believed the peak was categorically better than the valley. They organized their entire inner lives around the conviction that direction was destiny. He said, "Look at the path. The path does not know direction. The path is the same path." There is a psychological truth embedded here that it took the modern world another 2,000 years to begin excavating. The experience of falling in any domain, any life, any relationship, follows the same terrain as the experience of rising. The emotional geography is identical, only the direction changes. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen monk who spent decades in exile from his own country, wrote that the mud and the lotus are not opposites. The lotus grows from the mud, not despite the mud. The mud is the condition the lotus requires. The descent into difficulty is not a descent into the other country. It is a movement along the same terrain in a direction that feels worse because we have decided that down is worse than up. He spent decades separated from his homeland. He did not spend them in bitterness, at least not primarily. He wrote from exile in Plum Village in France about washing a dish as the full expression of a life fully lived. He wrote that peace is every step, not the step that arrives at a destination, but every step regardless of where the path goes. Heraclitus would have recognized this. The Zen vocabulary is different. The mountain metaphor is different. The insight is the same. You are not traveling toward the good. You are always already in it. Even when the path goes down, this does not make the downward passages easy. Heraclitus was not promising ease. He was refusing comfort that comes from falseness. He would rather tell you the truth about the path than tell you a story about the destination. The truth about the path is this: it is all the same path. The part you are on right now, whatever is happening in the life you brought into this room tonight, is not separate from the path that leads where you want to go. It is the same path, traveled in the direction you are currently traveling. The body knows this at a level below argument. Feel where it rests. Notice that the body is not fighting the position it is in. Only the mind fights. The body accepts the path it is on. Let the mind follow the body's lead for just a moment. We go on. Chapter 12, The Soul's Depth. He wrote something that stopped philosophers in their tracks then and stops them still. Fragment B45. You will not find the limits of the soul by walking in any direction, so deep is its logos. He did not say the soul is large. He said its depth exceeds walking. No matter how far you go in any direction, inward or outward, into the past or the future, into experience or into reflection, you will not reach the bottom. The soul and by this word he means something close to what we might now call the self, the seat of experience and judgment and understanding, does not have a bottom. This was not a religious claim in the way we might use religious. He was not promising immortality or a divine spark. He was making an empirical observation about the nature of inner life. Explore yourself seriously for long enough, and you will find that you do not reach an end. There is always more. The regret you thought you had understood reveals a layer you had not understood beneath it. The joy you thought you had finished with returns in a new form. The self resists the kind of complete inventory that the analytical mind wants to make of it. The logos of the soul, the organizing principle of the inner life, is deep enough that the logos of the outer world is continuous with it. Heraclitus did not draw a sharp line between the self and the world. The same principle of organization, the same logos, runs through both. Carl Jung arrived at this in a different century and from a different tradition. He wrote of the collective unconscious, the layers of the psyche that are not personal but structural, not learned but inherited, not individual but shared. The self, when you go deep enough, opens into something that is not only yours. He called it the self with a capital S, the organizing center of the psyche that is larger than the ego, larger than the personal history. He also wrote, though the specific wording varies across translations and the quote cannot be sourced to a specific verified text, that the shadow is everything the person refuses to recognize in themselves. What goes underground in the psyche goes underground because it was not acceptable, but it does not disappear. It organizes from below. Heraclitus would not have used Jungian vocabulary, but the structure is recognizable. The depth of the soul exceeds the ego's accounting of it. There is more than you think, more than you can fully map, and the more that is there is not a threat. It is the rest of you. The limits of the soul cannot be found by walking. This means you will not exhaust yourself. You will not reach a point where there is nothing left. This can feel frightening, and it can feel like relief. Tonight, let it be relief. The depth is not emptiness. The depth is more. Let your eyes rest closed if they want to. The ears stay open, following the voice. Everything else can be still. Chapter 13. The Common World and Private Worlds. Fragment B89 is directly, specifically about sleep. He wrote, and this is a paraphrase, since the original Greek is terse, that for the waking there is one common world, but when asleep each person turns aside into a private world. The common world is the world structured by the Logos. When you are awake, truly awake, attending to the Logos rather than to your private interpretation of events, you participate in something shared. The structure of reality is the same for everyone. The fire burns the same for the slave and the king. The river flows the same for the philosopher and the merchant. The same Logos organizes the same cosmos for all of them. But sleep, for Heraclitus, was a different condition. In sleep, the shared connection to the Logos withdraws. Each person retreats into their own particular darkness, their own particular arrangement of images, fears, and desires, their own private account of what things mean. The dreaming mind does not participate in the common. It is sovereign, solitary, and therefore limited. He was using sleep literally, but also metaphorically. He was also writing about a kind of waking sleep, the condition of moving through the day on private assumptions rather than attending to the logos. Most people, he thought, lived in this condition most of the time, moving through the common world while operating on a private interpretation that was never tested against reality, never held up to the logos. This is the echo of the second open loop I planted in chapter 3. The logos is the word. The private world is what you build when you stop listening for it. The common world is what you find when you do. Here is what this means for tonight. The thoughts circling in the room with you, the ones that feel most urgent, most pressing, most impossible to release, these are, in Heraclitus's terms, products of the private world. They are your particular arrangement of the day's events, filtered through your particular fears and your particular unresolved history. They are real. They matter. But they are not the logos. They are the dream. The logos is quieter. It does not insist. It does not circle. It does not replay the argument in search of a different outcome. It runs beneath all of that. You cannot reach it by thinking harder about the circling thoughts. You reach it by releasing them, not permanently, not with finality, but for now, and listening for what was there before they started. Somewhere beneath the private world, there is the common one. It is steadier. It has been there longer. It will be there when the private thoughts have run their course and gone quiet. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the surface beneath you. Notice that the room has been holding you this whole time, that the floor and the wall and the mattress do not need your attention to do their work. The common world operates without your management. For a moment, let it. Chapter 14. Nietzsche finds Heraclitus, Basel, Switzerland. The year 1872. Friedrich Nietzsche is 27 years old and already a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel, the youngest person ever appointed to that position. He has just published his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, and it has been received poorly by the academic establishment. He does not care much. He is working on something else, a series of lectures on the pre-Socratic philosophers, the Greeks who came before Plato, before Socrates, before the tradition hardened into its academic forms. He comes to Heraclitus. And something happens. He writes in Philosophy in the Tragic Age of the Greeks, a book he will never fully publish in his lifetime, that of all the ancient pre-Socratics, Heraclitus is the only one he can read without discomfort. The others he finds naive or excessive or simply wrong. Heraclitus he finds right in a way that matters. He says that Heraclitus's world is eternally perfect, not because it is comfortable, not because it contains no cruelty or loss, but because it is what it is with absolute consistency. The fire burns everything, including the beautiful and the beloved. The river takes everything downstream, including what you most wanted to hold. This is not a flaw in the design. This is the design. What Nietzsche found in Heraclitus was a model for what he would spend the rest of his career developing. The idea that the correct response to the nature of reality is not grief, but a particular kind of affirmation. He called it Amor Fati, love of fate, not tolerance of fate, not resigned acceptance of fate, love. The active, willed recognition that the way things are is not an obstacle to the life you want to live. It is the material of which that life must be made. He was 44 years old and collapsing into madness when he wrote the last of his major books. He had been ill for most of his adult life. He had been lonely for most of it. He had watched what he most cared about in human civilization, honesty, depth, courage in thinking, be replaced by something shallower and louder. He loved fate anyway. Heraclitus's fire had burned through him, and he did not ask it to stop. There is something in this that is not easy and should not be made easy. The lives of the people we are considering tonight. Heraclitus, Nietzsche, Marcus Aurelius in the tent were not comfortable lives. They were not lives that ended in triumph. Marcus Aurelius died on campaign, watching everything he had built begin to unravel. Nietzsche died in mental collapse. Heraclitus died in a ditch covered in dung, trying to cure himself of a disease his own ideas were not sufficient to treat. What they had was not happiness in any conventional sense. What they had was accuracy, a clear-eyed view of the nature of things, and in that accuracy, something that was deeper than happiness, something that did not require circumstances to behave. We are building toward what that something is. We are building toward it from many directions. Sleep if you need to. The parts that matter will find you when you need them. Chapter 15, The Child Playing. Fragment B52 is the strangest and most unexpectedly beautiful thing he left. Aeon, the Greek word for lifetime, or time itself, in its long arc, is a child playing at drafts. A child playing at a board game, moving pieces. The kingdom of the child. This fragment has been translated and retranslated and argued about for centuries. What did he mean by comparing time, or the life of the world, to a child playing a game? Several things, probably. But here is the most important. A child playing does not play for an external purpose. A child does not play drafts in order to accomplish something. The play is the point. The movement of pieces is complete in itself. The child is absorbed in the activity without needing the activity to justify itself. The child is fully present to the game. This is the logos at play. This is what the universe looks like when you see it at Heraclitus's level of resolution. Not a machine working toward a goal. Not a drama building toward a climax. A process that is complete at every moment of its operation, an ever-living fire that is not going anywhere because it is always already where it is. Pascal would have found this intolerable. Pascal wanted gravity. He wanted the universe to be serious about salvation, about eternal stakes. He was uncomfortable with the idea of a cosmos that played. Heraclitus found it sufficient. Not sufficient in the sense of just barely enough, sufficient in the sense of complete. The child playing does not lack anything. The child is, in the moment of play, whole. This is an echo of the first open loop, the two kinds of rest. The child at play is not trying to reach rest. The child at play is already resting in the way that total absorption rests the self from the burden of managing itself. There is no performer when the child plays. There is only the game. Most of what exhausts adults is not the work itself. It is the performance around the work, the management of impressions, the maintenance of a version of themselves that is acceptable to the people watching. This is the private world Heraclitus described. The child playing in the Logos order does not need to be acceptable. If your mind has drifted, bring it back gently. You are still here. We are still here. There is something ahead of you in this night. A kind of rest that is not collapse. A kind of stillness that does not require the world to stop. We are close enough to it now that I can say, it is not far. A few more hours. The path is the same path, going and coming. Let the body settle where it is. The mind can follow at its own pace. You do not need to hold on to any of what we have covered. The river takes it forward. It will be there when you need it. Chapter 16, Sleep and Waking. We have been circling this directly. Now we arrive at it. Heraclitus thought about sleep in a way that no philosopher before him had quite attempted. He placed sleep and waking on a continuum rather than treating them as separate states. And on that continuum, he located the Logos. He wrote in various fragments that scholars piece together. Those who are awake share a common world. Those who sleep retreat into their own. He also wrote something that sounds, in translation, almost brutal. Death is what we see when we sleep. Life is what we see when we are waking. He did not mean that sleep is dangerous. He meant something more interesting. In sleep, the connection to the Logos, the shared rational order of things, is suspended. The private world takes over. Dreams are, by their nature, private. They do not operate by Logos. They operate by association, fear, desire, the particular weather of the individual psyche. They are not shared. No one else can enter them. Waking, true waking, not the waking sleep of someone moving through the day on private assumption, is connection to the common, connection to the Logos. And sleep as threshold, as transition, as the passage from one state to the other, is something in between. You are in that passage now, or approaching it. The body is already partly there. The mind is following. The transition from waking to sleeping is, in Heraclitean terms, a movement from the common back into the private, from the logos to the dream. This is not a descent into something worse. The dream has its own wisdom. The private world, entered in genuine sleep, does its work, consolidating memory, processing experience, running the maintenance routines of the self. The body does not need the logos to carry out its repair. But there is a version of the transition that Heraclitus would have recognized as particularly difficult. The person who cannot leave the common world behind, who lies in bed still operating on the logos of the day, still in argument, still managing, still performing, whose private world, when it comes, is invaded by the concerns of the common. The ancient Stoics had a practice for this, an evening review. Seneca describes it. Before sleep, he would pass the day through his mind, asking not what he had accomplished, but what he had seen clearly and what he had seen through fog. He was not judging himself. He was running an inventory of what had been logos and what had been private interpretation, what had been real and what had been reaction. Not to fix anything tonight, only to name it, and naming it, release it. The day has been whatever it was. The logos will carry it forward. The sleep that follows does not need to solve it. Let the jaw soften, let the eyes find their rest. You do not need to manage what happens next. The transition knows the way. The river knows how to run. Something in you already knows the way to sleep. It has found it before. Let it find it now. Chapter 17. The Stoics' Inheritance. When Zeno of Citium founded Stoic philosophy in Athens around 301 BCE, teaching in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch which gave the school its name, he drew directly from Heraclitus. The Stoics took two things from him above all. The first was the logos, the rational principle that governs all things, which the Stoics identified with God, or with the divine reason, or with fate. The second was the idea of living according to nature, and by nature both Heraclitus and the Stoics meant not the wilderness, but the logos. To live naturally was to live in alignment with the rational principle of the cosmos. This inheritance shaped Western thought for 5 centuries. Marcus Aurelius, in the imperial tent on the Danube in 170 CE, the same year he was fighting the Quadi and the Marcomanni, trying to hold the northern border of the empire, while also managing the aftermath of a plague that had killed millions, sat down before dawn and wrote to himself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The phrasing is loose and the attribution is to translations that vary, but the content is precisely Heraclitean. The logos within you is yours. The logos outside you is not. He was 50 years old. He had watched his adoptive father, Antoninus Pius, die. He had watched most of his children die. He had watched Rome be threatened by barbarian pressure from the north, financial pressure from within, and the slow institutional decay that follows any long peace. He had not chosen any of these circumstances. He could not change them through wanting them to be different. What he could do was attend to his own logos, keep it clear, keep it running by the principle he had inherited from Epictetus, who had inherited it from Zeno, who had inherited it from the fragments of a man in a temple in Ephesus. Epictetus had been enslaved. His owner at one point broke his leg deliberately, perhaps to test the philosophy. Epictetus said, as it was happening, that the leg was going to break. Then it broke. Then he said, "Did I not tell you? This is not indifference. This is the logos clearly held." The leg was outside his control. His recognition that the leg was outside his control was inside it. He maintained the inside. Heraclitus did not found a school. He did not want followers in the organized sense. But the school that grew from his fragments lasted 5 centuries and reached into the private diaries of the most powerful man in the ancient world, a man writing by lamplight in a tent, trying to remember what actually mattered before the day began again. The same fire burning in the same river, the same logos underneath. Feel the floor beneath you, solid, still. The logos of the physical world is doing its work without your help. You can rest on it. Chapter 18. William James and the Stream. Cambridge, Massachusetts, 1890. William James, 48 years old, publishes the 2 volumes of The Principles of Psychology. It is the first major work of scientific psychology in America. It coins several terms that we still use. One of them is the stream of consciousness. James had been observing something that troubled the standard psychological model of his time. The prevailing view was that the mind operates by discrete units, ideas that arrive, are processed, and are replaced by other ideas. As if the mind were a factory floor, with each idea a piece on a conveyor belt, distinct, bounded, sequential. What James found, when he examined his own experience closely and read the reports of others, was something different. The mind does not operate in units, it operates in a flow. Thoughts blend into each other. They carry the residue of the thoughts before them. They anticipate the thoughts that follow. The transition between one thought and the next is continuous, not discrete. He called it the stream of consciousness. 2,400 years earlier, in Ephesus, Heraclitus had said the same thing about reality, not only the mind, but everything. The stream analogy, the river analogy, the flow that connects disparate moments into a continuous process. Heraclitus had it. He had the grammar. James found the same grammar from a different starting point, using a different vocabulary in a different discipline. This happens more than once with Heraclitus. His ideas surface in different centuries and different languages and different traditions, each time as though newly discovered, because they are newly discovered. The logos he described does not require anyone to have read his fragments. It is available for anyone who looks at experience with enough patience. You have had the experience James described. The thought that is not quite one thing or another, the memory that arrives tinted by the mood of the present moment, the idea that was one thing when you first had it and is another thing now. You did not stop being the person who had the first thought. But the current thought is not the first thought. The stream moved. This is not loss of self. This is the self doing what the self does, flowing, maintaining the pattern while the substance changes, being the river. Alfred North Whitehead, the British mathematician and philosopher who moved to Harvard in the 1920s and spent his later career developing what he called process philosophy, said something that Heraclitus would have recognized immediately. Reality is constituted not by substances, but by events. Not by things that are, but by things that happen. Process, not product. The universe is not a collection of objects. It is a collection of processes, each generating the conditions for the next. Whitehead was not influenced by Heraclitus in any direct way that scholars have traced. He arrived at process philosophy through physics, through mathematics, through the implications of the new science of relativity. And he found Heraclitus there, waiting. The stream runs. It has always run. You are in it. The thought that worried you an hour ago has moved downstream already. The thought pressing on you now will follow, not by force, by nature. The stream runs. Let your breath be the evidence. In, moved, out, gone, new, the stream runs. Chapter 19. The Bow and the Lyre. Fragment B, 51. They do not understand how a thing agrees with itself while being drawn in different directions. It is a backstretched connection, like a bow and a lyre. He was pointing at something he found everywhere and that others missed everywhere. The harmony that is generated by opposition, not by agreement. Two strings on a lyre, tuned to the same pitch, do not produce harmony. They produce unison. Unison is pleasant. Harmony is something more. Harmony requires the strings to be tuned to different pitches in a relationship that creates consonance, precisely because of the difference between them. The harmony lives in the interval. The interval is made of tension. A bow is the most direct illustration. The stave of the bow wants to be straight. The string wants to be loose. The bower's work is to create a relationship between the two that neither would choose on its own. The stave is bent against its nature. The string is drawn against its nature, and the result, the bow under tension, is a system capable of something neither the stave nor the string could accomplish alone. The arrow flies. The bow cannot fly the arrow without the tension. The tension is not a flaw to be corrected. The tension is the system. Consider what this means for the places in your life where you feel most stretched. The obligation that pulls against the desire. The relationship that requires more than feels natural. The aspect of yourself that has been asked to hold something it did not want to hold. You have been reading these as failures of equilibrium, as evidence that the balance has not yet been achieved. What if the tension is the bow? What if the stretch is the system working? This is not a license to accept everything. Heraclitus was not saying that all tension is productive. He was saying that the kind of tension that exists between genuinely opposing principles, between what is and what you want, between who you are and who you are becoming, between rest and waking, is not evidence of disorder. It is evidence of a system doing its work. The bow does not relax. The bow holds its tension. The arrow flies. Montaigne, in his tower, in his essays, was holding exactly this kind of tension. He was simultaneously a man of action who had served in government and in the legal system, and a man of reflection who found action exhausting and reflection inexhaustible. He did not resolve this. He held it. He wrote from within it. His essays are the sound a bow makes when the arrow is about to fly. The tension in you right now, whatever is unresolved, whatever is held between two positions you cannot reconcile, is the bow. The body knows. The body holds. Let the room be quiet around it for a moment. The bow does not need to be explained. It only needs to be held. Breathe. Chapter 20. Nature loves to hide. Physis cryptesthai philae. Fragment B, 123. Nature loves to hide. This is one of the densest things he left, and one of the most immediately recognizable. The things that matter most are not on the surface. The order that governs everything is not visible to the casual eye. The deep structure does not announce itself. It conceals itself, not maliciously, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as the natural condition of anything that is genuinely deep. A river looks simple from the bank. Moving water, a direction, the far shore. Sit by the river long enough and you begin to see more. The eddies beneath the surface, the different speeds at different depths, the way the current changes around submerged obstacles you cannot see. The river's complexity does not reveal itself to the glance. It reveals itself to the sustained attention. Your interior life is the same. The thought that woke you at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, the one that felt urgent and specific, is not the thought itself. It is the surface expression of something deeper that you have not yet sat with long enough to see clearly. The anxiety that visits you at transition times, when one chapter of the life is ending and the next has not yet become clear, is not random. It has a structure. The structure loves to hide. It does not reveal itself to the quick examination or the anxious inventory. Simone Weil, the French philosopher and mystic who died in 1943, a year before the end of a war, she was unable to witness the conclusion of, wrote about attention as the highest form of human activity. Not the focused, straining attention that tries to extract meaning by force. The open, receptive attention that creates the conditions in which meaning reveals itself. She was describing the same thing Heraclitus was describing in B 123. Nature loves to hide, but it does not hide from everyone equally. It hides from those who approach it with force and agenda. It reveals itself to those who approach with patience and openness. This is the condition you are in right now, if you let it be. Not forcing sleep, not forcing resolution, lying in the dark with an openness that does not demand anything from what comes next. The things that love to hide reveal themselves in this condition more readily than in any other. You do not need to find them tonight. You do not need to do anything with what reveals itself. The finding is the work. The doing can wait until morning. Let the attention soften. Not close, just soften. Not blank, just open. The way the river's surface opens in the still hour before dawn, reflecting everything equally and without preference. Nature loves to hide, but it is not hiding from you. It is waiting for you to stop looking so hard. Chapter 21. Character is Destiny. Fragment B, 119 in the traditional numbering, Ethos Anthropoi Daimon. The translation is contested. The most common rendering is character is destiny. A more literal reading is character is a person's guiding spirit, their daimon, the divine inner voice, the genius that leads. Either way, what Heraclitus was saying is this: in the river of change, where everything flows and nothing holds its form indefinitely, one thing persists: not the circumstances of your life, not the body which changes, not the beliefs which evolve, the character. By character, he did not mean personality, which is a social performance shaped by context and audience. He meant the deep orientation of the self, what you return to when the performance is over, what holds under pressure, what re-emerges after the flood. The ancient Greek concept of the daimon was not what the word became in later usage. It was not a demon in the Christian sense. It was the divine element within a person, the shaping spirit that was neither fully the person nor fully separate from them. Socrates spoke of his daimon as the internal voice that told him when he was about to do something wrong. He did not hear it telling him what to do. He heard it only in the negative, a restraint, a warning, a subtle check. The daimon was the logos within, particularized for one person's character. Heraclitus was saying that this internal orientation, this character, is where your fate lives, not in the circumstances that come at you, in your characteristic response to them. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He returned to it in the Meditations again and again in different words. He knew that the empire might fall. He knew his own death was as certain as anyone's. What he could not resign was his character. What he could not let the river carry away was the orientation that governed how he met each new moment. Epictetus, born without freedom and ending his life as a respected teacher in Nicopolis, would have said the same thing in harsher language. He had tested his character against circumstances most people never face. The character held, the circumstances did what they did. What does your character do when the circumstances are difficult? When the river is running fast and the water is cold and the far bank is not visible? You already know the answer, in some sense. Not perfectly, not with total clarity, but in the darkness of a late night, when the performance of the day has been set aside and the real self has a little more room to breathe, in this condition, you know something about your own character that you cannot always know in the middle of the day. That something is the daimon, the guiding spirit. The river changes. The character that navigates the river, that is yours. Nothing the night carries away will take it. Chapter 22. The Gold and the Fire. Fragment B 90. All things are exchanged for fire, and fire for all things, as gold for goods and goods for gold. This fragment works on two levels simultaneously, which is characteristic of Heraclitus at his best. The literal level, fire is the medium of exchange in the universe, the way gold was the medium of exchange in the ancient economy. Just as all goods can be converted into gold and gold converted back into goods, all matter can be converted into fire and fire back into matter. Fire is the universal currency. But the deeper level, what does exchange reveal about value? When you exchange a thing for gold, the gold makes visible what the thing is worth, not its sentimental value, its exchange value, its relationship to everything else in the economy. The fire, as universal medium, makes visible what everything is worth in terms of the cosmos. It burns away what is not essential. What survives the fire is what has real exchange value with the Logos. This is a question worth sitting with in the quiet. What in your life would survive the fire? Not literally. Not the inventory of possessions and accomplishments. Those are goods, not gold. The question is, what converts back to fire and back again without losing itself? What in you is fireproof, not because it cannot be touched, but because it is itself already fire? Character, again, the Logos within. The deep orientation that is not performance. The things you have carried for decades that still feel necessary. Not the obligations that could be shed if you chose. The things that feel constitutive. Not rules you follow, but facts about who you are. Seneca wrote, "It is preserved in his letters to Lucilius that a person who tries to avoid all difficulty merely postpones it and loses the opportunity the difficulty would have provided." The fire reveals. The fire is not the enemy of the gold. The fire is how the gold becomes gold. He was in his 60s when he wrote that, watching Nero consolidate power in Rome and knowing his own position was precarious. He had been exiled once. He would be ordered to die within a few years. He wrote anyway. He converted his remaining time into letters, into something that had exchanged value with the Logos long after the particulars of his political situation had ceased to matter to anyone. The fire took him. The letters remained. What of yours will remain? Not as a worry, as a question held gently. The way you hold a thing that is warm and does not need to be gripped, let it be with you. Chapter 23. What the Fool Misses. Fragment B 17. Most people do not understand such things even when they encounter them, nor do they comprehend after they have learned. He was not kind about this. He named it plainly. Most people, most of the time, miss the Logos, even when it is directly available to them. Not because the Logos hides, we have seen that it does hide, but from force, not from attention, because most people are not attending. He drew a distinction that sounds harsh and is actually generous. The fool, and this was the ancient Greek category, amathos, the unlearned in the specific sense of those who have not inquired, is not a person of low intelligence. The fool is a person who has decided, consciously or not, that their private interpretation of events is sufficient, that what they already think is accurate, that nothing new needs to be discovered. Socrates made the same distinction in Athens. He said his only wisdom was knowing that he did not know. The Athenians who had him tried and executed were, by every conventional measure, more successful and more powerful than he was. They were also absolutely certain of things that were not certain. This certainty, Socrates thought, was the real danger. Heraclitus agreed. The Logos is available to everyone. It is not reserved for the educated or the wealthy or the born lucky. It is the common structure of the common world. But it requires a particular kind of openness to receive, not passivity, an openness that is willing to revise, willing to step into the river again and accept that the river has changed since you last stepped into it. What has changed in your understanding of something you thought you understood? Not necessarily tonight, but across the years. The thing you were certain of at 30 that you are less certain of at 50. The relationship you thought you had mapped that turned out to have more rooms than you had found. The belief that served you well for decades and began eventually to feel like a very small room. Heraclitus would say, the Logos was offering revision all along. The revision was available. The private interpretation had to be willing to loosen. The loosening is not weakness. It is the bow finding a new tension, the river finding the channel through the new terrain. The fool is not an insult. It is a description of a condition available to all of us and occupied by most of us at some point in every day. The sage is not someone who has escaped the condition permanently. The sage is someone who recognizes it quickly and returns to the common when they find themselves drifting into the private. If you are still awake, welcome back. We are in the deep middle of this now, not long before the final turn. Come back gently. We are still here. Let the breath be the anchor. The Logos is working. You are in it. Chapter 24. Thunder and Stillness. Fragment B, 64. The thunderbolt steers all things. He reached for the largest force he could name. The thunderbolt in ancient Greece was Zeus's instrument. It was the supreme expression of power, the intervention of the divine into the human. It was also, physically, the most dramatic expression of energy in the natural world. Light and sound and heat delivered instantaneously across vast distances. He said, "This steers everything, not gradually, not gently, not through the slow persuasion of reason. The Logos, when it acts as a force on the large scale, acts with the speed and irreversibility of lightning. Change comes. It comes faster than you are ready for. It changes everything. He also said in other fragments that the thunderbolt is fire. That fire is the Logos. That the Logos is the deep grammar of reality. The thunderbolt and the Logos are the same thing at different scales, the sudden event and the slow pattern behind it. What does this do for the person lying in the dark at the end of a day when something shifted, when something that felt permanent revealed in a moment that it was not? When the event came too fast to process and you are still, hours later, not quite sure what to do with it. Heraclitus does not offer comfort in the form of reassurance that it will be all right. He offers something different, the acknowledgement that sudden change is the nature of the Logos operating at full speed. Not an aberration, not a punishment. The Logos doing what the Logos does. The thunderbolt steers, not destroys, steers. The direction changes. What was pointing one way is now pointing another. This can feel like wreckage from inside the change. From outside, from the perspective of the Logos, which operates in time scales beyond the human, it is steering. This requires something of you that is very hard. Trust in a principle you cannot see the full operation of. Not blind trust, not the trust of someone who has stopped thinking, the trust of someone who has followed the river long enough to know that it does not run by accident. Under the thunder, there is always the same stillness. Not silence, the river makes noise. Not absence of force, the fire burns. Stillness, in the sense of a structure that does not lose itself in the events it generates. The Logos under the thunderbolt is the same Logos as the Logos in the quiet hour before dawn. Breathe. The thunderbolt has passed if it is going to pass. The steering has already happened if it has happened. What remains is the course the steering has set. You will not see the full course tonight. You will see the next few steps. That is enough. The room is quiet. The thunder is somewhere else. Breathe. Chapter 25. Heidegger in the Heraclitean River, Freiburg, Germany. The winter of 1943 to 1944. Martin Heidegger is 60 years old. He is the most prominent philosopher in the German-speaking world and one of the most controversial figures in the history of philosophy, then and now. The war presses on every side. Students have been conscripted. The university is thin. The city will be bombed within 2 years. He is teaching Heraclitus. Not for the first time. He has been returning to Heraclitus for 20 years, pulling at the fragments the way you pull at a thread that seems, every time, to have a little more left. He teaches the course twice, over 2 semesters, one on the Logos, one on aletheia, the Greek word for truth. In Greek, aletheia literally means unconcealment, the removal of hiddenness. Truth as the process of bringing out of hiding what was hidden. Heraclitus's fragment B 123. Nature loves to hide. Heidegger's Aletheia. Truth is what happens when hiddenness is overcome. The two ideas fit together like the string and the stave. Heidegger's reading of Heraclitus, whatever one makes of the reader's biographical complexity, produced one of the most careful philosophical engagements with the fragments that has ever been attempted. He was not looking for what Heraclitus contributed to the history of ideas. He was looking for what Heraclitus had seen that had been lost in the intervening 2,500 years. He found several things, but the most important was this: Heraclitus's logos was not at its root a principle of reason in the way later Greek philosophy understood reason. It was something closer to what Heidegger called gathering. The logos gathers. It brings together what belongs together, allows what is separated to find its relationship, maintains the coherence of a world that appears to be fragmenting. The logos gathers. Consider what that means for the experience of a late night when everything feels dispersed. When the day has scattered you across a dozen concerns, a dozen unresolved conversations, a dozen versions of yourself that were required in different contexts, you came to bed and you are not yet gathered. You are still distributed across the day. The logos, Heidegger's reading suggests, is what gathers you, not an effort you make. A principle that operates beneath the effort. As sleep approaches, the gathering begins. The river runs in one direction. The scattered water finds the channel. Let it gather. You do not need to gather yourself. Something older and steadier than your intention is already doing that work. Heidegger kept lecturing as the bombs fell on German cities. He kept returning to Heraclitus. Whatever he was looking for, he had not finished finding it. The logos does not finish. It gathers and gathers and gathers again. Chapter 26. The Philosopher's Death. The ancient world preserved accounts of how philosophers died. This was, for the Greeks, a kind of test. The philosophy was only as reliable as the life it produced, and the life was only as reliable as the death it arrived at. Diogenes Laertius, writing in the 3rd century CE in his Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, gives us the account of Heraclitus's death. It is strange and a little undignified, and, if you look at it from the right angle, perfectly Heraclitean. He fell ill with a disease the ancient world called dropsy, what we would call edema. The body accumulates fluid where it should not. The hands and ankles and face swell. Breathing becomes difficult. Movement becomes painful. Heraclitus went to the physicians. We do not know exactly what they offered him. He found their explanations insufficient. He asked them, reportedly, if they could make a drought from a flood. They could not answer him satisfactorily. He left. He went instead to a cowshed. He covered himself in dung and lay in the sun, intending to draw out the excess fluid through the warmth. This was not an absurd idea for the ancient world. Heat was understood as the principle that drives out cold. Dryness was understood as the principle that counters wetness. He was applying his own cosmology. He lay in the dung, in the sun. He died. The death is, in its way, a piece of philosophy. He diagnosed his condition in the same terms he used to describe reality, as an imbalance of opposites that required correction through the opposite principle. He refused the conventional physicians because he was following a different logic. He died following it. There is something honest about this that makes it more than a cautionary tale about trying to treat illness with philosophy. He believed what he wrote. He believed it well enough to stake his life on it. He was wrong, as it turned out, in the specific application. He was right about the framework. The river carries everyone downstream. The Logos makes no exceptions for the person who discovered it. Heraclitus would not have expected it to. He had written that the hidden harmony is better than the obvious. He had written that war is the father of all things. He had written that the way down and the way up are one and the same path. He took the way down. He followed it in exactly the way he had described it, as a logical process, a conversion of fire returning to fire, at around 60 years of age, in a cowshed in Ephesus. The city was still there, the temple was still there, the book was still in the temple, and something he had understood persisted in the fragments that had already escaped into the world, preserved in the arguments of the people who disagreed with him, waiting for the next reader who would look. He would not have asked for more than that. The river runs. Chapter 27. Impermanence, East and West. Somewhere around 483 BCE, in what is now Nepal and northeastern India, Siddhartha Gautama died. He was approximately 80 years old. He had spent 50 years teaching, after his awakening in Bodh Gaya, what he had understood about the nature of suffering and its cessation. One of his central teachings was anicca, impermanence. All conditioned things are impermanent. Not some things, not things that seem fragile, all conditioned things. The body, the relationships, the beliefs, the self, as ordinarily understood, all impermanent. He was alive at roughly the same time as Heraclitus. They lived in different parts of the world, they spoke different languages, they drew from entirely different traditions. And they arrived at the same insight. The clinging to permanence is the source of suffering, not the impermanence itself. The clinging, the Buddha, and here I am paraphrasing across a long translation history, since the original Pali texts are complex and the oral tradition precedes the written record by centuries, taught that what we call the self is a process, not a thing, a stream of experience, continuously arising and passing, not a fixed substance that has experiences. The self is the river, not a stone in the river. Heraclitus said the same thing from the opposite direction. Not starting from the self and discovering it is a process. Starting from the process and discovering that the self is its particular shape. Thich Nhat Hanh, in the 20th century, spent his life finding the language that would allow this teaching to reach people who came from outside the tradition. He called it interbeing, the recognition that nothing exists independently. The leaf exists because of the cloud that brought the rain that nourished the tree. The cloud exists because of the ocean. The ocean exists because of the sun. Everything is in relationship with everything else, continuously, without interruption. The interweaving is not background, it is the substance. He wrote, "If you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents and all generations of your ancestors. All of them are alive in this moment. Each is present in your body. You are the continuation of each of these people." Heraclitus would have recognized this. The river carries all the water that has ever run through it. The pattern holds. Let the body feel the surface beneath you. The surface exists because of the materials that compose it, the people who made it, the elements that formed those materials, the process that formed those elements. The web of relationship extends in every direction without a boundary you can find. You are in the middle of it. You have always been in the middle of it. The middle is not a position of danger, it is the only position available. It is also, it turns out, the position of rest. Let the breath be the river. Let the river be the night. Chapter 28, The Two Kinds of Rest. We have been building toward this. In Chapter 2, I planted the first thread. There are two kinds of rest, and we are building toward the second kind tonight. Here it is. The first kind of rest is the rest of exhaustion. The body runs down, the energy depletes. The nervous system insists on a pause. You lie down because you cannot continue. You sleep because the alternative is collapse. This kind of rest is real and necessary, and your body is expert at demanding it. It announces itself through the eyelids, the slow heaviness of the limbs, the blurring of focus. You know this kind. You have felt it today. The second kind of rest is different. It does not come from running out of energy. It comes from alignment. Heraclitus described a universe in which the Logos runs through everything: the river, the fire, the sleeping self, the waking self, the deep structure of reality. When a person is living in opposition to the Logos, fighting what cannot stay, insisting on permanence where there is process, demanding that the river holds still, there is a particular quality of exhaustion that accumulates, not muscle fatigue, something deeper, the tiredness of a sustained effort that was never going to succeed. You know this tiredness too, though perhaps not by this name. The person at 2 a.m. running the mental accounting. What is owed? What was not received? What went wrong? What might still be salvaged? The mind is not doing math. The mind is trying to make the river hold still. Every calculation is a new attempt to grip what has already moved downstream. The second kind of rest arrives when the grip releases, when the attempt to hold the river still is simply suspended, not permanently, not with resolution, but for now. When the private world of urgent interpretation is recognized as private, and the common world of the Logos is allowed to be what it is, steady, continuous, undemanding of your management. This is not resignation. Heraclitus was not a resigned person. He was one of the most awake people in the ancient world. But he understood that the awareness he valued was not the awareness of someone gripping. It was the awareness of someone attending, open in the current, not fighting the river. The second kind of rest is what happens when you stop fighting what cannot stay. When the hand opens, when the thought that has been circling is allowed to continue its movement downstream in the direction it was already going. You do not need to do this forcefully. You cannot force this kind of rest. It cannot be gripped into existence. It can only be allowed, and it is allowed tonight. Breathe. The room has been steady. The Logos has been running. Let the second kind of rest be what is here. Chapter 29, the self that keeps changing. You are not the same person who woke up this morning. Not dramatically different. The differences are small. A memory revised by the act of remembering it. A belief that shifted a few degrees in the course of the day's events. A tissue repaired. A cell replaced. A preference that has moved imperceptibly toward or away from something you held more firmly yesterday. You will not be the same person tomorrow who is lying here tonight. Derek Parfit, the Oxford philosopher who published Reasons and Persons in 1984, spent years thinking about personal identity across time. He arrived at a conclusion that disturbed him at first, and then, with sustained reflection, felt like relief. He argued that the self is not what we usually take it to be, a continuous, unified entity that persists through time. It is a series of connected but distinct states, linked by memory and continuity, but not identical across time. There is no moment, he argued, at which you can draw a clear line and say, this is the same person as before. The connections between your current self and your past self are real, but they are the connections of the river, not the connections of a stone. The pattern persists. The substance changes. He found this liberating. If the self is a river rather than a stone, then the things that happened to earlier versions of you are less binding than they feel. The shame you carry from 30 years ago belongs to a person who shares your history but is not, in the strict sense, you. The fear that was appropriate at 20 is not automatically appropriate at 60 because the person carrying it is genuinely different. You are always the river, always the current version of the pattern, always, in Heraclitean terms, the Logos expressing itself through the particular configuration of this body, this history, this night. Montaigne, sitting in his tower, writing his essays, discovered something similar through a different method. He was trying to paint himself, not a fixed portrait, but a moving one. He said that by the time he finished describing himself, the self had moved. The essays are the record of a self that kept outrunning its own description. He found this delightful rather than frustrating. He was always already someone slightly new. There was always more to find. Let the weight of the earlier versions of yourself rest where it has accumulated. They are not wrong to be there. They are part of the river, but they are not the current. The current is here, in this bed, in this dark, in this moment that is already moving. It is moving toward rest. Let it move. Let the shoulders soften, let the jaw settle. The body is doing what it does. The river runs. Chapter 30. What cannot be held. The third thread, planted in chapter 9. He said war is the father of all things. He said strife is the engine of change. He said the opposites generate each other. He meant that resistance, real resistance, the kind that has genuine force on both sides, is the mechanism by which anything develops. The payoff I promised is this. There is a specific kind of resistance that does not generate anything. It only exhausts. It is the resistance to the logos itself, the insistence that what is flowing should stop. The grip on what the river has already moved. Here is the distinction Heraclitus drew, and that takes effort to see clearly. Polemos, the generative conflict he celebrated, is the meeting of two genuine forces. It is the string against the bow, it is the fire against the fuel. It is a conflict that has something real on both sides and produces something through the meeting. This kind of conflict teaches, it shapes. It is, as he said, the father of all things. But the conflict against the logos itself, the effort to hold what cannot be held, to arrest what cannot be arrested, to insist on permanence where there is process, this is a different thing. This is not polemos. This is the exhaustion of the arm trying to hold back the river. The river does not notice. The arm tires. Most of what exhausts the adult mind at night is this. Not the genuine conflicts of the day, which were real and may even have been productive. The conflict against the logos. The insistence that certain things could have gone differently and should have gone differently, and it is possible, if the argument is run one more time, to arrive at a version of the day that is more acceptable. The day was what the day was. The river ran through it. It ran through it in the direction the logos set. The insistence is the exhaustion. The releasing of the insistence is not defeat. It is not giving up. It is the recognition that the argument is with the logos, and the logos does not argue back. It simply continues. Let the hand open. Not dramatically, not with finality, just open. The way you open a hand that has been gripping something in sleep, when you wake and find the grip still there, gently, without making it an event, the thing that was gripped will go where it was going. The hand will be lighter. That is enough for tonight. Chapter 31, The Logos Beneath. The second thread, planted in chapter 3, the single word. It predates science and every religion in its current form. We use it still. Most people do not know what Heraclitus meant by it. The word is logos, and now you know what he meant. He meant the principle that organizes everything, the grammar of reality, the deep structure that persists through all changes, the thing that makes the river a river even when the water is entirely new, the thing that makes you recognizably yourself across decades of change. The partial payoff came in Chapter 4, when we described the logos as the rational principle beneath the surface of things. The echo came in Chapter 13, when we placed it in the sleeping and waking distinction, the common world of the logos versus the private world of the dream. We have been circling it all night. Now, the full payoff. The logos is not outside you. This is what Heraclitus insisted on, and what the Stoics inherited, and what Jung, from a completely different direction, rediscovered. The logos runs through you. You are a configuration of the logos, as the river is a configuration of water, as the fire is a configuration of heat and light. What persists in you across the decades of change, the deep orientation, the character, the daemon Heraclitus, named in Fragment B 119. This is your portion of the logos. The logos expressing itself through the particular pattern that is you. Carl Jung, in a letter in 1957, described what he called the self, capital S, distinct from the small self of the ego, as the center that remains unmoved while everything else orbits it. Not a place you can locate anatomically, not an idea you can hold fixed in the mind, a function, the organizing principle of the psyche, operating beneath the conscious level, maintaining the pattern while the substance cycles. He was describing the logos within. When the thoughts are circling, and the night feels long, and the private world of interpretation and worry is running its accounts, beneath all of that, the logos is at work. The same principle that runs the river. The same fire, gathering, maintaining the pattern, keeping you recognizably you through the dark, and the sleep, and the morning that will follow. You do not need to find it. You are in it. It is in you. The river does not need to locate the river. Let the breath be the reminder. The logos breathes through you without being asked. This is what he left in the temple. This is what survived the burning. The logos beneath. It has always been there. Chapter 32. Amor, Fati, and Panta Rhei. Nietzsche's Amor Fati and Heraclitus's Panta Rhei are two ways of saying the same thing. Everything flows, the statement of what is. Love of fate, the response to what is. Nietzsche described Amor Fati as the highest formula he could conceive for the relationship a person could have with their life. Not tolerance of the circumstances. Not acceptance in the passive sense of someone who has stopped fighting. Active affirmation. The willed recognition that this is my life, not the life I arranged for myself in advance, not the life the world owed me, but the life that is actually happening, including its specific weight and difficulty and the particular shape of its griefs. Love of that. Not despite the difficulty, not after it resolves. Now, including this. He wrote it at the end of his life, in the last period of his productive thinking, in 1888. He was collapsing. The collapse was not yet complete, but something was wrong in a way that would not be corrected. He wrote as if he knew he was finishing. He wrote Amor Fati into Ecce Homo, his autobiography, as the formula that defined his relationship to his own life. He was 44. He had been in chronic pain for decades. He had been alone, in practical terms, for almost all of his adult life. He loved it. Not sentimentally. Not with the love of someone who finds everything pleasant. With the love of someone who has looked at the thing honestly and said, This is what I was given to work with. This is the material the fire has to work with, and the fire works. Seneca wrote his letters to Lucilius, knowing that Nero might order his death at any time. He wrote anyway. He converted the time into the letters into something that the river carried forward. He was not resigned. He was fully engaged with the specific constraints of his specific life, and working within them with the full force of what he was. This is Panta Rhei understood from the inside. The river runs. You are in the river. The running is the life. You can fight the current, or you can be a very good river. Most people are fighting the current tonight, lying in bed, fighting the current. The current will not lose. The river will run. Tonight, for these hours, for this dark, for this particular configuration of the logos that is you in this particular moment, let the river run. Chapter 33, The River at Night. Right now, in the dark, the river is running. Not metaphorically, literally. The cells that compose your body are in motion. The chemical processes of digestion and respiration and repair are underway. Neurons are firing in the patterns that correspond to whatever remains of waking consciousness and whatever is beginning of dream. The heart beats, the lungs fill and empty. The whole elaborate process of being a body in the world continues without a moment of supervision on your part. You have never supervised any of this. It has run itself by the logos since the moment the particular pattern that is you first organized itself from the materials the world provided. You are always already in the river. The river is always already running. Even in sleep, especially in sleep, the current is strong. The ancient Taoists, working in China in roughly the same century as Heraclitus, described something they called Wu Wei, non-forcing. The sage, in the Taoist tradition, does not struggle against the current of the Tao, the way, the deep order of things. The sage flows. Not passively, the sage remains fully engaged, fully present, fully responsive to the specific demands of each moment. But without the particular kind of effort that is fighting the nature of things. Lao Tzu wrote that water is the softest thing, and yet it cuts through stone, not by force, by persistence within its own nature, by being fully what it is, continuously, over time. You are water. You are the fire. You are the river. You do not need to be anything else tonight. The weight you feel in the limbs, that is, the body settling toward its own rest, the slowing of thought, that is, the river finding its nighttime pace, the darkness around you, that is the condition Heraclitus associated with the private world, the world of the individual dream. You are entering it. The Logos will be here when you come back. It is always here. Let the breath be the last signal from the waking world. In, the Logos taking in. Out, the Logos releasing. In, out, the rhythm that was running before the day began and will be running when the day begins again. Nothing is stopping. Nothing needs to stop. Let the body be the river at night. Let it run. Chapter 34. The Hidden Harmony returns. We have been here before. Fragment B 54. The hidden harmony is better than the obvious. You have been listening to this for hours now. Not the fragment, the thing the fragment points to. You have been in the hidden harmony all night. The harmony does not announce itself. It does not ask to be noticed. It runs beneath the things that do announce themselves, the thoughts, the sounds from the street, the slight discomfort in the pillow, the list that floats up and then sinks. The hidden harmony is the fact that all of this is organized. The thoughts float up because the psyche is processing. The discomfort registers because the nervous system is doing its work. The list surfaces because something in you wants to be sure the important things are not forgotten. None of these are malfunctions. They are the Logos doing what the Logos does, running the process. You have not had to manage any of this. The process has been running itself. This is the hidden harmony. Not the peace you manufacture by forcing the mind to quiet. The peace that is already present beneath what the mind manufactures. The order that runs the system even when the system appears disordered. Heraclitus thought the philosopher's work was to see this, not to create order. To see the order that is already present. To look beneath the surface where nature loves to hide and find the structure that was running all along. You have been doing this in your way all night, following the thread, letting the river take the thought downstream, and trusting that the next thought would arrive when it was ready. Something has shifted, probably. The urgency of the early night thoughts, the inventory of the day, the replaying, the accounting may have softened. Not resolved, softened. The river has moved them a little further downstream. They will be there in the morning if they need to be attended to. Tonight, they have moved. The hidden harmony is what runs underneath even the difficult periods. Even the nights when the thoughts will not settle, even the years when nothing in the outer life seems to hold the shape you hoped it would hold. Beneath all of it, the Logos. Why? Beneath all of it, the river. Beneath all of it, the fire that is not consuming, but converting. The bow is still in tension, the lyre is still strung, the hidden harmony is still sounding. You do not need to find it. You are already in it. You have been in it all night. You have been in it all your life. Chapter 35. Let the river move. A few practical things for the person who is still in the room with this. The thought that is still circling. It does not need resolution tonight. You have followed it long enough in this session of the mind. It is in the river. Let the current take it until morning. It will not be lost. It will be there when the day creates the right conditions to attend to it. Right now, the current is moving downstream. Let the thought move with it. The tension in the shoulders, if it is there, that is the hand gripping something the river has already passed. The grip is a habit. Habits do not need to be broken forcefully. They can be noticed and then released. The way you release a breath without deciding to release it. The next breath comes on its own. The next position of the hand comes on its own. The tension knows how to release. Give it permission. The concern about tomorrow, it exists in a time that has not yet arrived. The logos of tomorrow will be organized when tomorrow's moment arrives. Right now, the logos of tonight is doing its work. The work of tonight is rest. The logos of rest is the river running, the fire converting, the body doing what it does without supervision. Tomorrow can have its logistics. Tonight is for the river. Heraclitus left his book in the temple and walked away. He did not follow it to see how it would be received. He trusted the Logos to carry it where it needed to go. It took 2,500 years. But you are here tonight receiving it. He could not have planned that. He did not try. The Logos carried it. The Logos carries everything. You do not need to carry tonight. You have been carrying long enough today. The river carries now. Let the jaw soften. Let the eyes rest wherever they are resting. The mind does not need to follow every thought anymore. The thoughts are part of the river. They will flow without attention. Let the body find its own arrangement. It knows the arrangement better than the mind does. The body has been sleeping since long before the mind learned to worry. The breath, in, out, the river, moving. All is well in the Logos. All is well in the river. All is well in the fire that is not consuming but converting, always as it has always done. Move downstream. We are almost at the shore. Chapter 36. The Unchanging Law of Change. There is a city on the western coast of what is now Turkey. The harbour does not face the Aegean anymore. The silt from the Cayster River, the river that Heraclitus walked beside, has filled the bay over the centuries. The sea is 3 miles away from where the harbour was. The city is ruins now, beautiful ruins visited by people who come from a world that did not exist when Heraclitus was alive. The Temple of Artemis is one standing column and a spread of scattered stone. The book is gone. But the fragment B54, the hidden harmony, is better than the obvious, survived. It survived because Hippolytus, writing in the 3rd century CE, quoted it while arguing against heresy. It survived in an argument, the way so many of Heraclitus's ideas survived. Through the opposition, the river carried it. Polemos, The strife he celebrated, it preserved the very ideas it argued against. The people who disagreed with Heraclitus preserved him more faithfully than the people who agreed with him, because they quoted him exactly in order to refute him. The opposition was the instrument of survival. He would have found this entirely appropriate. Tonight you have been in the river. You came to it with whatever the day brought, the specific weight of your particular life, the thoughts that were circling, the things unresolved, the tiredness that was not only in the muscles. You came to a man who was born 2,500 years ago in a city whose harbour has silted over and whose greatest building is a single column in a field. He said, "Everything flows." He said, "The hidden harmony is better." He said, "The Logos runs through all things, including you, including this." He said, "Character is destiny. The pattern persists through the changing water." He said, "Let the river move." You cannot step into the same river twice. You have not been the same person all night. The person who began this journey with you a few hours ago is not quite the person at the end of it. Something has moved through. The Logos carried something. What it carried, you will know more fully in the morning. For now, the first open loop, the two kinds of rest. You have had both tonight. The first kind carried you here, the body's exhaustion, the demand to lie down. The second kind has been arriving, gradually, over the last few hours. The rest of alignment, the rest of a person who has stopped fighting what cannot stay, the rest of the river that has stopped trying to hold its own water in place. The second kind is available to you now. It is more available than it was when you began. The third open loop, what hides in resistance. The payoff was in chapter 30. The resistance to the Logos is the only resistance that never produces anything. The resistance the Logos generates, the strife it fathers, those are the forces that build everything real. Stop resisting the night. The night is the Logos. The dark is the condition in which nature loves to hide and then slowly to reveal. Let the river carry you now, not forward. The river does not know forward as a destination, just downstream, in the direction the Logos has always been moving, in the direction your body already knows. Heraclitus left a book in a temple. The temple burned, the book burned. But the fragment survived, and the fragment carried what mattered. And what mattered is here tonight, in this room, in the particular shape of the Logos that is you lying in the dark. The river runs, the fire burns, the hidden harmony sounds in the room. Sleep now.